we're going to talk about some chairs this morning.
Straight shoulder.
Rob
Yep, yep.
and Larry and I have been working for the last couple of weeks on making all these parts. Larry's gonna, or Rob and Larry are gonna make 6 of these chairs for Rob's shop. First time I was at Rob's shop is when we started this project. Man, I'm suffering from shop envy. Anybody not been there? Golly. So what we're going to do today is just talk about some basic chair construction. I brought 2 examples here. Have we got those 2 pictures?
Yeah, Bob, you got the.
These are what I would refer to as stick built, because they're just a bunch of sticks put together. And the 2 examples here, we've got a high back low seat and a low back high seat. And what we're going to do today and next week is we're going to build one of these, but we've modified it so it's going to be a standard low seat chair with the same back. So then we'll have a low back low seat. So that's a dining group that this chair came out of. I did that 15 years ago. Got a lot of good use out of it. And the next one, we've only got 2 pictures today, is what this is from. My wife and I wanted something new for our breakfast nook, and we wanted a counter height chair and table set, which is what this is. And we'll talk about those dimensions here in a moment too. So back to the first chair. These are both basic mortise and tenon construction, just a bunch of sticks put together. They've got some things in common. They both have 2 curved ladder rungs. In this case, they're put together so it's like a ladder back chair. In this case, they're embellished with these ebonized pieces. And embellishment, that's a matter of how much effort you want to put into it, what it is you're looking for, what's your final destination going to be, how much work you want to put into it. So in this chair, there's considerably more work than there is that one. That one is really a simple one. Typical splayed seat. In order to do that, and I'll pass this around, you need to do these angled tenons, which I wasn't really in the mood to do for that chair. And made some little ebonized caps for the ends of the legs. All these mortises and all these tenons are secured with a ebony square pin that's put on a diamond orientation. And this is typical of, this is an arts and crafts kind of a chair. You have through tenons because of the splay, and in addition to those angled tenons, this bottom piece has angled shoulders. So all those are complications, and when you're doing a half a dozen of these and making all those parts, that just takes some time. And angled tenons are very tricky. You got to be very meticulous to make those. Now, the upholstery we'll talk about mostly next week, but I'll just give you a quick little summary of your options. You can have these professionally made. You look at the upholstery on the chairs you're sitting in right now. You could just go to a upholsterer and have them do this much better than what I did. These are just simply wrapped around foam rubber and batting type things. In this case, the pad is captured all the way around. So it sits inside the frame, so none of my sloppy ends will show on it. This one is just sitting on top of the chair. It could be easily made to sit inset like that one is, or you could have it professionally made, but for what we're using it for, breakfast nook chairs is just fine. Questions so far? Everybody good? So the main construction that these have in common is just the way they're built. You can see they have a continuous leg that's made out of 8/4, and both of these are cherry, by the way. And that's the main part that you're going to need a pattern for. So this is the pattern for this chair. It's 1/4" MDF, and it's used as a guide for a pattern bit, a bearing pattern bit. The wood that you use for this is going to be 8/4 and you need a piece that's wide enough to cut this continuous piece out. And then of course you can get the front legs out of there as well, so it's not terribly wasteful. So this is what the chair is based on, that leg. And then from there you just mark out wherever your mortises are going to be, how you want to make any other cuts to lighten the chair up. And then all the other pieces are just straight tenon pieces. There's only one angle on this chair. You can see on this one the leg is somewhat put back, and that's an aesthetic consideration, but also a safety and stability consideration because of the height of the chair. If somebody wants to get tempted to lean back on the legs like they do, it'll make it less likely to fall over. So you have one angle cut here on this bottom stretcher, and it's an angled shoulder, and we'll show you that in a moment here too. So what we're going to do today is we're going to assemble one of these chairs. Ask you questions, throw comments out here, and we'll hopefully get all the information that we need. Yes, sir?
How do you cut those angled tenons?
On this chair, if any of you were here a couple years ago when I did the shop solutions, jigs and fixtures presentation, you may remember I had this elaborate homemade device I made for cutting mortise or cutting tenons particularly. When I made this set, there's all told, I believe there was something like 120 mortise and tenon joints, and a lot of them were angled, and I did them all on a table saw. So to cut one of these on a table saw, you gotta literally change your setup for every cut. So to cut the shoulders, I always cut shoulders first. I'm going to have a tilted blade one way and do all those cuts, and then tilt it the other way and do those cuts. And then for the shoulders, go back to square blade, change the miter gauge and make those, and hopefully they all end up in the same plane. And then go to a tenoning jig on a table saw and angle this just right. It's really a pain. So that's what inspired me. This set of chairs is what inspired me to make that machine I made, where I can. And so this particular example here was made on that machine, and I brought this last time when I showed that. It's done with a 3/8 router bit, and once you put the piece in the machine, it stays there stationary, and then your router moves around the machine based on your cranking. And then one more note on the dimensions of these chairs. There's standards for all furniture construction, and if you go online and just type in the search term furniture dimensional standards or anything like that, you'll get all kinds of information on what the standards are for chairs. So for a typical chair like the ones you're sitting in, this one, you're going to find that 18 inches high for the seat is the standard. For this one, counter height, and this is for a 30-inch table, standard table. Counter height is 36 inches, so the standard here is going to be 24. I made these 23.5 because the cushion's going to give some thickness to it. And then there's bar stools too, bar height tables. A bar is 42 inches high, and then that would make the chair 42 minus 12, what's that, 30 inches high. So typically you're going to find 12 inches of difference between the height of the table and the height of the chair. And then you can go to furniture stores, and that's what I used to do, particularly in the pre-online days. Go to furniture stores with a tape measure and just look at things and measure them. I've seen these range between 17 and 19 inches, but the accepted standard is 18. So when you're building something like this, that's what you have to keep in mind, or what you have to have in mind is, what is it I want? So in this case here, we wanted a counter height table and chair set. I'll start with a proportioned elevation drawing. That's what I want it to look like, and then just take it from there. And most of it's basic woodworking. So let's get on with this. So what we got is this same leg, only it's been shortened. The back is going to be the same as this back, but the legs were shortened so we could get a standard 18-inch high chair. And this is going to be a 6-chair set that Rob is
Yes.
going to have in his shop.
We're gonna assemble it right there.
So this was my template for this chair. So what we had to do is just take this and we drew some extra lines on it where we're going to have to cut it off. This mortise was for that chair, so we just kind of fudged around to see where these were going to end up. And we actually did use this same one, even though it hangs off one end, as the router template. So in order to get 12 of these that are all alike, you want to draw these out, just the basic design, bandsaw and leaving a little bit past the line so you can double stick tape your template to it and then just run them over the router table and they all come out identical. And then mark off your mortises. Now I'm a mortise first guy. There's always a lively discussion around that. Mortise first or tenon first? Who cuts tenons first? Any tenon first people here?
I could
One.
use it.
Okay, one heretic. Is there any others? But when you're cutting mortises, particularly if you're using a hollow chisel mortiser, that's the size mortise you're going to get. And if you need to make it a little bigger, it's a setup, and it's difficult to do that with a hollow chisel mortiser. If you need to make it smaller, then you got to stick pieces of veneer or shims in there. So I always make my mortises first, and then I make my tenons. And I usually make them so they're just a little bit oversized. And I want them to go together so they're not going to come out. They're going to go together without having to force them. They're going to not fall apart. And you do that just by tweaking these. You can do that with a shoulder plane. You can do it with a sanding block. And if you get them close enough, a sanding block is real easy. Just take a little bit off and make them fit. Much easier to make a tenon fit a mortise than it is to make a mortise fit a tenon. So these are the legs for that chair. Now, the rest of it is just like I said, straight pieces of wood. Everything on this chair is square. And then there's some, I guess I would say, optical illusions to give the impression that there's things that aren't square on here. So if you look at the top of these legs, they're splayed out, right? Splayed out like that. So these are parallel, and all we did is tapered these. Just cut that off on a table saw to give the impression of a splay. And on this seat, it's a square seat, but I made the cushions on these so the base is wider here than it is here. And that gives the impression of a splayed chair. So it's a little visual trick so the chair doesn't look too square. So let's start assembling. On this chair, these are tenon, mortises and tenon. They're kind of a hassle to make. So when I did this set here, I did it with dowels and holes. And it's equally as strong. It's not going anywhere, and much easier to make. Now to assemble these, easiest way to do this.
Hold it, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On the chair, the original chair that this is a kind of a copy of,
Mm-hmm.
you said you had laminated those back pieces.
Right.
But here, obviously, they're cut.
Yeah, here we had here we had some 8/4 stock to work with. There I didn't. I wanted maple, and I wasn't going to go out and buy that much 8/4 maple. So I happened to have a big 4/4 piece. So you can do this in a couple ways. If you have enough stock to actually yield a curve like we did here, you can just bandsaw those out and then sand them up so they're nice and smooth. Or if you had just a 4/4 piece, cut it up into thin strips and glue them up, and then that makes them so you can bend them. You can't bend a piece of 4/4 wood, right? But you can bend 4 pieces of 1/8 inch wood easy enough. Norm used to do that on his show. David Marks did a couple shows on that, making laminated curves. So everybody know what I'm talking about there? Okay. Now, to assemble it, I'm going to I'm going to assemble back legs and front legs first, and then we can put those two together. So for the front, on the top of this front leg where we've got intersecting mortises, they're going to be cut to a 45-degree angle, so where they intersect in the middle of the chair. Let's see, that was that right.
Some assembly required.
Batteries not included. Yep, you're right.
Yeah.
Was that Larry that said that?
No.
Oh.
I'm almost.
Larry made all these, by the way, all these stretchers. Oops. Yeah, once you get all the parts cut, then it's just a matter of assembling and gluing up. So these pieces here, they're roughed out. We had it roughed out. Yeah, they're just roughed out like this. Make them extra long. I would assemble these two and clamp them in place, and then decide where I want these to go. In this case here, we've got them so they're 2 inches from the top. Get them exactly where you want them. Make sure they're square, and then you just draw a pencil line, and then just go to your table saw and adjust your miter gauge. You know, you're making a 90-degree cut, just to adjust your miter gauge, eyeball it to that line, and then make a cut way off the line, and then eyeball it and see if it's parallel. And get a little closer until you're satisfied, and do it that way. And these are made 2 different widths. That's simply an aesthetic consideration. Wide one on top. Narrow one on the bottom. And everybody is familiar with the concept of dry fitting, rehearsing your clamping strategy before you commit yourself to glue. All right, so that's the chair back. Now you can see how that splay looks there, but it's actually not a splay, it's just cut that way. So everything looks good. When you put these together, you're not going to get a square here, but I'll check all these to make sure everything's good and square. And when you're making these things, you want to pay attention to that as well. So that looks good. And in your rehearsal, your dry fit, you want to pay attention to things like, how am I even putting these clamps on? Obviously, I want to leave room to get my pieces in here. I don't want a clamp laying right across my mortise. And ultimately, I want all these clamps around the top pointing down because I got to have access to my seat pan in order to do the next steps, which is going to be marking out that seat pan. When you're putting this together, squareness is important.
You don't do diagonal measurements?
I don't. If I'm making like a big box or something, I'll use diagonal measurements and or a big framer square. But if it's square, if you're putting something together, all your pieces are the same length. Let's say you're making a square box and all the corners are square, you know your diagonal measurements are going to be right. But yeah, I've done that, but I don't generally measure diagonally, certainly not on something like this. So there's the front legs. So now all we got to do is attach those with the remaining stretchers. The top are made at 1 3/4 inches. The ones along the bottom are made at, in our case here, 1 1/2 inches. On these templates that we have here, there's one for the front legs that was made for the bigger chair, so we just have to adjust that. There's one for making these cuts here, and one for marking off the way that these have been lightened. So you want to lighten them so those are all on the inside from either view. And when I do the router pattern cutting on this, I leave everything square. I'm cutting to that pattern right there. And my preference is to do all this stuff later on a sander for a couple of reasons. By leaving it square, I've got good square surfaces to reference to the mortising table. And I don't like the pattern cut around end grain. I've had experiences where the bit has caught and just torn it apart, which leads to a time-consuming repair. One more piece, and this one is just a straight piece of wood. This is going to get glued inside here, and it's going to go flush with the chair, and that's where the seat's going to sit. And then we have this little reveal here, which serves the purpose of just giving the back of the cushion a little inset to sit in, so the back of the cushion isn't going to be exposed. I think these are long enough. So once you get this all clamped up for your dry fit, and you're satisfied with it, I've got access to my seat pan. If I had my little square, I'd be checking wherever the square areas need to be squared, making sure it's squared up, and it's not rocking around. And there's a little bit of a angle on the bottom of this back leg because it's splayed out, and that's nice and flat to the table. On the finished piece, I just stuck on some felt on the bottom so we don't mess up our floor, which is kind of typical. So there we are. Now, are we ready to glue up? All right, so when this is glued, I want these to be flush with the ends of the legs. There's always enough room so you can kind of tap them into place. And then this is going to get glued in here, like I said. So now I've got just a 4 surface piece to set the seat pan on. It comes out to the full width of the legs here, and then it kind of blends in or goes back in to give that illusion of the angle. There are 4 little pieces drilled and countersunk. They're going to get glued into these corners. There's T-nuts on the top of the pan, so it's going to sit in here like this, and the screws are going to come out from or come in from underneath. That's what holds the chair in place. Because this is end grain, which isn't the strongest thing to glue on, we're going to glue them and brad nail them into place. Okay? But yeah, there's no other screws other than the 4 screws that hold the seat pan on, and that makes the seat removable, of course. Now, because this is handmade, it's very difficult to theoretically, every piece from every chair should be interchangeable with each other. But you're going to find, I'm getting a good laugh there because everybody knows that, right? You're going to find a millimeter here and there difference. Even things like where all these cut at exactly the same length. Did we get the hole right in the center? So we number these. This is number 1. So when we put these together and when we lay this out, we want to make sure that number 1 seat pan goes to number 1 chair. All these are numbered. That's number 1. That's number 1. So when I get it together, they're going to go in the same place. Now when we laid this out, we double stick taped these in place. And then we put our blank seat pan on and then drew our perimeter around it and then figured the angles and then just came up from underneath with a pencil and marked those holes out. And then drilled a 1/16 pilot hole in each one, and then went to the other side and counter bored it for the T-nut, and then drilled all the way through. So this matches that exactly. So when we make 6 chairs, if I tried to put number 1 seat pan on number 4 chair, chances are that all the screws wouldn't line up. Maybe we'll get lucky and they will. That's the target condition. Everything is perfect. So I like to say I strive for perfection, I'll settle for excellence. And then we discussed this a little earlier. Yeah, Mickey?
How many hours so far?
I've been here about 1 hour.
Cutting those pieces out.
I don't know. Larry, how long did it take you to cut all those? 2 hours to cut all these pieces? Yeah. And back to your question about did we make 1 chair first or did I make 1 chair first? No, but when I made when you're setting up for tenons, you always use a scrap piece to set your saw up or whatever machine you're using. Make sure you got that set up. And then cut a set and make sure they fit. And then you can go ahead and cut all the other sets. So I might find that when I put that first piece together, maybe this angle was just a little bit off, 4 degrees, you said, Larry? And things like that. But target condition would be everything is exactly right and they're all interchangeable. Yeah, it's not a real super time-consuming thing. It's a couple evenings in the shop and a weekend or 2. So the whole set, the table and the chairs, the longest part of that was finishing, getting that color all on, waiting for lacquer to cure in between coats, hand rubbing, all that stuff you do with a finish. That's what's really time consuming. But once you get rolling on the woodworking, making a pattern, cutting, starting to trim them up on the router table and all that stuff goes pretty fast once you get rolling on it.
I was surprised we started cutting it out, what little wood it takes to actually make the chair.
Yeah, it's
not much material.
The most wood on this whole set was the top, the tabletop. You look at 46 by 42 inches of 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch maple. How much 8/4 maple did I have to buy for that? It was a lot. It was like 2 12-foot long by like 8-inch wide pieces. A lot of lumber up there.
Do you sand before?
Good question. This has been sanded with a random orbit sander at 80 grit. So when you get done with this, you're going to have burn marks here and there, and scratches and flaws and stuff. So and all these pieces, by the way, are rounded over with a 1/4 inch round over bit. I like to sand with 80 grit to get to this point, and when I'm making finished chairs, I'll go to a 150 or a 180 hand sand, and I like to hand sand every piece before I put it together, before I put a finish on it. And again, that's a little time consuming.
Before you finish.
And before I assemble, I'll hand.
Before you assemble.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hand sand every piece. And then when it's all put together, I'm going to look around and just see, did I miss anything? Did I ding something with my clamps or something like that? And try to do the best I can without getting too anal about it. And by sanding with that 80 grit, when it's in pieces, you can find where your mistakes are and where your burn marks are and what have you, and just try to make them disappear as best you can. Okay, so we're ready to glue. Are we ready to glue?
Yes.
So we're going to take it all apart, and then we're going to start applying glue. And when we take it apart, we'll take care to make sure we have everything oriented properly so it goes together the same way we put it together. And when you're dry, you just kind of look around, and again, you see, did we do a good job on cutting our shoulders? Does everything fit flush like it should? And it looks like we did a pretty reasonable job here. So back to these without tenons. These are just 5/16 fluted dowels, and that's really old school, but I still use the heck out of these things for certain things. And you know, even just under clamp pressure without glue, and those are very, very solid. They are going nowhere. And it's a real easy joint to make. And again, maybe the amateur would say, yeah, but you know what? I didn't cut tenons on these things. I used dowels. Who the heck cares? Okay, so let's set that aside. We'll just glue this one up first. You want to do the honors on that, Rob?
Sure. I love glue. I can't find it, but I love it.
So, do you use a damp paper towel when you're gluing for your?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Okay, so
I'm gonna
let me
get
go.
some.
I'll go get that for you.
Okay. Hot sauce.
Hot sauce and glue. We never use them up before they go bad. The basket. Well, it sits here forever.
Yeah, people talk about how long you're married. When you get married, you get a thing of hot sauce, and you still got it when 50 years later.
One wet one, one dry one, and then I'll start on the back if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, you got them just this position, just like this.
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
And that's the right angle. Okay. Tape around 5. See. 2.
Talking about that.
Really, be honest now. Was that exciting or what?
Are we looking at glue? Look, he's got glue running out. That's a good job, Buzz. Did I get it all? That's funny.
Well, we're gonna get these on now too, right?
Yes.
So we're gonna need the air gun.
It's already set.
All right, number 1 is over here.
Okay. You want to nail these now?
Sure.
You need to make sure we're flush. You had the one.
Ready?
Yep.
Do that nail? Did the nail come out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Put one more on each side. One more on each side. While you're doing that, because we got to have that too. So those angle pieces.
There you go.
You ready to nail one?
Yeah, that's right. Very ready. I've always seen these. Always wondered how they put them on.
Lots of different ways to do it. Could be screwed if one wanted to.
We've been screwed before.
Let me go ahead and nail this piece in place here real quick. Are these long enough to go all the way through
Yeah.
there? You gonna buy these too?
No,
So that's all we needed these for.
I have a lot of them.
Used clamps. Got a little sloppy on that one.
Got a hold there before you do it.
Oh yeah, it's not gonna be sloppy. Still got lots of squeeze out. Let's go
Okay.
west.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's about most of what we're going to cover today. Next week, we're going to upholstery the seat, put it together, and talk about all the finishing and stuff. So if you come back the same time next week, the glue will be dry. We won't have to watch the glue dry.
Unless you want to.
Yeah, we'll leave it right here if you want to watch it.
That could actually make for an interesting video. Just set the camera up and
Okay,
watch it dry.
we can leave the camera going. All right, well, thanks a lot. If anybody else wants any more tickets for the raffle, this is your last shot. Oh, you want?
Very good.
Thank you, guys.